Pripyat, Soviet Union, a newly budding town, newly built for its residents. A great triumph of Soviet architecture and urban planning. Fully equipped with everything a resident would need. Well-supplied hospitals, clinics, and stores. More than enough entertainment, including sports halls, and Olympic-sized swimming pool. Even a new amusement park was built and prepared to open in the coming days. Except it didn't. In fact, it hasn't been used in the past few decades. If one were to use it for simply a few hours, they would fall ill. Why? Because only 3 kilometers away, the largest and deadliest nuclear disaster took place. Chernobyl. Now, to understand the catastrophe that happened at the Chernobyl power plant on April 26, 1986, one must understand how the reactors worked that made up the nuclear power plant. The reactors were called RBMK reactors, Reaktor Большой Мощности Канальный. In short, there are a few components to this reactor. The reactor is fueled by pellets of slightly enriched uranium oxide, which are enclosed in a tube to form a fuel rod. These are arranged in a cylinder called a fuel assembly. Also inside these fuel assemblies are pressure tubes, which are cooled by water, that is allowed to boil inside the tube at 6.9 megapascals. To put this in perspective, the atmospheric pressure of the Earth is 101 kilopascals. 2 separate water coolant loops with 4 pumps each pump water throughout the pressure tubes. There's an emergency cooling system put in place just in case, wink wink, to replenish the fuel. The fuel rods can be lifted in and out of the reactor. In order to stop the fission from spiraling out of control, graphite moderators are situated between the pressure tubes. This reactor is the only reactor in the world to use the combination of graphite as a moderator and water as a coolant. To also control the fission and release of neutrons, control rods are inserted and can be inserted at will to absorb neutrons in the reactor. To produce electricity, steam from the heated coolant is fed into a turbine. To repeat the loop, the steam is condensed and integrated into the circulating coolant. Aside from the mechanical aspects of the RBMK reactor, there are also technical aspects. Often associated with RBMK reactors is the term positive void coefficient. To put it in simpler terms, how much reactivity is going on. If the void coefficient is negative, a steam increase will mean the reactivity will decrease. Keeping the void coefficient negative is a basic safety feature in most Western reactors. However, the RBMK reactor has a positive coefficient, which means that more steam will increase the reactivity. You can start to see how this is a major problem. Power level of Reactor 4 is lowered as a result of the shutdown tests that were to be run. The shutdown is being taken advantage of to determine if in the event of loss of station power, the turbine could provide enough power, whilst it was slowing down, to the main cooling pumps until the emergency system could be activated. In other words, would the core continue to be cooled during the loss of power? The lowered power holds at 1600 megawatts, and the emergency core cooling system is isolated. At midnight, the shift changes. However, the new shift employees are less experienced and never received proper instruction for the test. Power levels of the reactor plummet far past the minimum prescribed safe power output of 700 megawatts. The reactor is now unstable. The power level remains at a sustained 500 megawatts until the INS-AG-1 fails to conduct the quote-unquote hold power at current level signal, and the power level drops to a staggering 30 megawatts. In violation of the plant's safety guidelines, operators remove the control rods. The power still has trouble rising due to the xenon buildup in the core. After the power level stabilizes, albeit at a lower level than safe, the test continues and all safety features are turned off. The test officially begins. The emergency button is pressed by the operator to drop the control rods into the core. The reactivity increases and the control rods get jammed. The power surges and exceeds 530 megawatts. Let it be noted that this power surge is still way below the minimum safe power output. There is a sharp increase in the pressure and water level in the steam separator drums. Critical state. Reactor number 4 explodes and blows the 1,000-ton roof off. Radiation is released into the air. Firefighters arrive at the scene. They are completely oblivious to the radiation they are exposed to. Soviet officials agree to block off Pripyat. Police officials blocking off the city have no idea they are being exposed to this radiation either. The blaze in the reactor core will burn for several days. The Soviets' attempted cover-up of Chernobyl was futile. In Sweden, on April 28th, monitoring stations picked up abnormal radiation levels. The number of deaths reported from the actual explosion of Reactor 4 is a speculation. Some sources say as little as only 2 people, while others say as many as 50. However, the most dangerous part of the Chernobyl disaster was not the explosion. It was the radiation released into the atmosphere. Between 50 to 185 million curies of radionuclides, or radioactive particles, were released into the air. This number is several times greater than the radiation released after the atomic bombs were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Of these radionuclides, 100 radioactive elements were released. The most dangerous include iodine, strontium, and cesium. Cesium-137 has a half-life of 30 years, meaning it will exist for a long time after the explosion. This radiation quickly spread to areas in Europe such as Belarus, France, and Italy. Radiation-induced illnesses such as cancer have still been in effect today due to the radiation from Chernobyl. Following the disaster, a circle-shaped exclusion zone was created by the Soviet Union. The circle initially spanned a radius of 1,017 square miles, but was later increased to 1,600 square miles. One of the forests in the exclusion zone, named the Red Forest, is often regarded as one of the biggest scientific mysteries. Because of the high radiation dosage the forest received from the disaster, many of the trees instantly died and turned a rusty red color. Many of the trees were cut down and new saplings were planted due to the contamination. There is much fear today of fires in the forest. The soil still contains very high doses of radiation, so a fire could likely spread this radiation and release it into the atmosphere. Deep under the Chernobyl reactor number 4, inside the basement of the facility, lies another strange scientific phenomenon known as the elephant's foot. During the meltdown of reactor number 4, the uranium core reached temperatures as high as 1600 degrees Celsius. This heat melted the zirconium cladding around the core, combining it together with uranium, steel, and concrete. This mixture of materials created a radioactive lava-like substance that flowed and solidified down to the basement. Its radioactivity was so intense that when it first formed, if you had stood beside it, you would die in around 300 seconds. Today, it is known as the terrifying legacy of Chernobyl. When talking about the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster, it is vital to mention the many brave people, known as liquidators, who sacrificed themselves to deadly radiation. These liquidators replaced the contaminated soil, cleaned the nuclear power plant, and quickly constructed a shelter around the reactor known as the sarcophagus. The cleanup of the reactor prevented further explosions that would have killed thousands of people. Over the years, as the sarcophagus has deteriorated, a new shelter, dubbed the New Safe Confinement, was constructed. Through the years, Chernobyl has been left standing still, frozen in time. The wildlife reclaims the land once again. Although nuclear power is relatively safe compared to other energy sources, the effects of Chernobyl still haunt the minds of people today. This disaster is one disaster that will never be forgotten in history. A reminder to all to ensure that all safety measures are up to date and accounted for.